By the end of World War II, Russia had more tanks than the rest of the world combined. 22,000 in fact. Realizing the inevitability of war with Russia, all the Allied forces began to develop war doctrines based around tank combat against Russia. This meant everyone would be using ridiculous amounts of tanks and invading and holding territories with armored vehicles. Of course, that war never came. What did show up was conflict in Asia. While North and South Korea was resolved by armistice, the conflicts in the former French Indochina brewed over in what we now refer to as the Vietnam War. The Patton and the Zippo were most commonly deployed of the tanks, but in the sky we'd also see Skyhawks and Mi-8s. The Americans were waging this war as if it was against the Russians themselves. 10 years later, it is proved to be wrong doctrine, and as of 1975, all the military tactics, all the tanks, all the aircraft, all the anti-air weaponry became vastly out of date. They were now fighting a different war that relied on a very different type of technology and tactics. The Vietnamese kicked America's butt and embarrassed them enough to show the world that conventional warfare wasn't going to cut it anymore. So a pre-1975 deck will be in the spirit of post-World War II. That is, more is better. So when we're creating our deck using these 1975 units, we will gain a pretty decent bonus. 80% availability per card. Category C decks are notorious for cheesing. Helicopter rushes and tank rushes are the most of the infamous. But they are also some of the most vulnerable because of how particularly low quality these decks end up being. A single high quality unit can destroy entire cards of them. Category C decks are best played in team games higher than 3v3. The job of a good Cat C player is to use high numbers of weak units to cover a large area. So with this in mind, small maps are going to be very ineffective for Cat C decks. Because of their high numbers, Category C decks are great at holding giant towns. The excessive number of Category C infantry can overcome the fewer numbers of infantry that others might be able to deploy. Because of their higher deployment, they can also make better use of supply trucks and will never need an FOB. Category C players can resupply allies who have more cost-effective units that might need it. By now, the MiG vomiting at the beginning of games is all too common. The Cat C player brings his fighters out first so that if they die, they can still bring out tons of more cheap fighters. All the while the ally will bring out his more powerful fighters after those to knock out enemy planes. The big thing, however, is that Category C players are intended to cover a lot of ground. If all of your forces are in just one area, you are simply doing it wrong. If you are in charge of a flank with a Category C deck, your job is normally to hold an area and slowly push, making cost-effective trades. So generally speaking, the only good pre-1975 nations you can play as will come as a pack, and generally speaking, that's going to be the USSR and Poland because of their fairly ridiculous number of planes they can put out. But you can also make a mixed pack pre-75 deck, and you can also make a mixed NATO pre-75. So for this little section, I'm going to give a sample of one, and I'm going to go ahead and go with a packed USSR Category C deck, 1975. And, oops, got to give it a name. Let's go with Bananas Are Delicious When Fried. That is so true. So here's our template. Should look very familiar to everyone. And so you have to try and think, what kind of supporting role will you be playing now? As a good Category C player, you should always try and max out your infantry. So this is our sample that I'll be giving to you. We're going to max out our Motostirel Cs because they do quite well. I'll have at least one vehicle with a rocket on it, just because rockets are badass. We're also going to want at least one Conquerors, and we can get away with using these guys here. Now, we'll want to have some helicopter infantry potentially, so, I mean, where are they at here? The Spetsnaz, very potent anti-infantry. So we get one of these guys. They have a pretty good napalm round launcher on it, which will make them very, very efficient, but very expensive, 50 points. Quite expensive for us. And we'll also want to use a napalm, and for that I'll be getting a Sabri. I'm giving these 1-point vehicles because most of these vehicles will not be particularly useful after the fact. We want cheap, high amounts of units. And so we can get more helicopter infantry, so we're going to get some VDV squads to do that. And then we can finish off our infantry with a single anti-air infantry. So we're going to get the URAL 3750. Sorry, URAL, yeah, that's 1 point. And this is your Prizik Strelas, pretty well standard anti-air infantry. So boom, we fill the infantry slot. We'll be able to dominate most of the towns on the map, and you can spread these infantry all along the map, or if there's one big giant town, put them all there. Now, we'll also want to have a few planes. Now, if you're a pack player, you want to have MiGs. And it's important to recognize symbols. So for this one here, note we have infrared. This means that it cannot be hit by anti-radar. So that's going to be a good plane. And then we want to look for an anti-radar plane. So here's a good one, the Su-24. Quite expensive, but with our ability to rally ridiculous numbers of units, we'll get a few extra of these. So we'll go ahead and grab this one. Now we're going to want some sort of bomber because that's what we're protecting. So we'll go with the MiG-21S, pretty cheap. And we'll also have this one with the rockets on it, MiG-21SM. So this is a pretty decent amount of planes. Now if you want to go crazy, you want to win the skies, you can add in other ones. Like there's all sorts of, there's CEMAC, these are radar based, they have pretty decent long range. We have one with SACLOs and with heat rounds for a tank ground assault. These will be your heavy tank slayers. And then of course we have the old-fashioned classic Yak-38 here with the napalm bomb, which will allow you to control a lot of zones. But moving on, we are playing this deck. We will want to have some supplies. And like I said before, you don't really need to grab the FOB if you have this deck. You can actually just grab a few cards of these guys, supplies. And always, you kind of want to grab 2 cards of commands. Probably don't need 2 armors, obviously. So there we have it. We have our logistics handled. Now we have only 7 points left. So you're kind of seeing here, this is a pretty heavily loaded card. Now if you're wanting to do a little bit more cheese, you have 2 helicopters to choose from for the Soviets. Both are pretty average, but this one has a Melikutka P attached to it, which means that you'll be able to deal with tanks pretty well. Whereas this one has rockets, which will help with a lot of stuns. So we can grab 1 plane. We want to grab at least 1 tank. Probably 2. In this case, not too many options will strike you. The T-62 is not a bad choice. 25 points. Good deal. And then, you know, you can get maybe this guy with its rocket. It's a small Melikutka P. The T-55A is a pretty good choice. Decently armored, has an anti-infantry gun. And then you also have your T-72, which a lot of people love. And that's the one I would pick. And for our support, we want to get some anti-air units and some artillery. So we'll get the Govodika, which is a mortar, which will be cheap and cost-effective. And we want to go for the word is cheap, cost-effective things. So this one here, you notice 6 radar missiles. This one only has 4. The accuracy is much, much higher. The range, however, is roughly the same. Rate of fire drastically goes up, though. So with this AK, you'll be able to get it a lot of rockets very, very quickly and kill some planes. The Buk is always a good choice. It's a slightly more expensive, but definitely worthwhile. Now we have 1 more point left. Ouch. Choices to be made. Now we can do things like get rid of 1 infantry. Not going to hurt us. Maybe even one of these models, keys, can be gotten rid of. That gives us more points. We want to have 1 to 2 recons. So you have your choices. The Revedkas are going to be good for spotting. Spetsnaz are good for assassination missions. And since we've limited our decks, we don't have many options. So we'll go for a Revedka, and I'm going to use a 1-point vehicle. And with the Spetsnaz, I will be selecting also the 1-point vehicle. So when we go into vehicles, we don't have too many that we need here. And this is where style will come in a little bit. We can get these SU 12254s, which have a decent anti-vehicle feature to them, and you can rally a ridiculous number of them. You can get a Malukutka P, which is a very good rocket, and you'll be able to get, once again, a ridiculous number of them. And then you can try and go for some of these semi-anti-air things. These guys can deal with helicopters and planes moderately well. They have a good chance of a stun. And so this is kind of the template for a good Category C deck. A decent number of planes, or a ridiculous number of infantry, or a ridiculous number of planes. Have some support options, a couple of tanks, some recon, some vehicles, and some helo. Very imbalanced, but that's the idea. Cover large amounts of territory. Hey guys, Troublemaker here. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe to the channel. And if you'd like to have some time with your friends in the community, definitely check out /r/wargame at Reddit. See you guys next time.
Uh-oh, yep. The warriors coming across.